Hi, and welcome to this section of the tutor where we're going to learn how to subtract 3 and 4 digit numbers. And the good news is the rules are exactly the same as what we learned in the last section on how to subtract 1 and 2 digit numbers. So let's go ahead and do a few problems here. If you have 317 minus 27. Now if you had a problem where you were subtracting 317, taking 317, subtracting 27, where you had a 3-digit number minus a 2-digit number, the first thing you would do would be proceed in the same way that we had started all the other problems, and that would be to go ahead and write the big number on the top, the 317, the 3-digit number on the top, and let's go ahead and write the 2-digit number on the bottom, and go ahead and put our subtraction symbol, and that would really be the first thing that we'd do. Okay, that's sort of the first thing we're always going to do for these problems. And then, just like before, we're going to start in the right-hand column, and we're going to do some subtraction. So there's really no difference here. The only difference is the numbers are a little bit bigger. But if you were going to start in this column, you would say 7 minus 7, and 7 take away 7, you should just remember is 0 because you're subtracting everything away, so there's nothing left. Okay? The next thing we need to do is look at the next column here, and here we have a 1 minus 2, but this is the same problem that we had before. We have a smaller number trying to subtract a larger number from it, so you can't do that. You can't take 1 and then subtract 2 from it. At least you don't know how to do that yet. So what we're going to do is borrow. We're going to borrow from the bank here. We're going to borrow from the 3, and we're going to make him a 2. So we're going to take 1 away from the 3, and the 1 that we take away, we're going to put it right here in front of this number that we're trying to make bigger. We're going to make him an 11. So that 1 that we put in front, we're just going to make him an 11. Okay? Now we can do this. 11 minus 2, starting with 11, 10, 9, subtracting 2 from it, we're going to be left with 9. Okay? So we're going to put a 9 right there. Okay? So 11 minus 2 is 9, and that's going to be that part there. And then the only thing left to do is we have this 2 here, subtracting 0 because there's nothing there, so we're going to have a 2. So the answer is going to be 290. Okay? So it's the same thing as before. We start on the right and we move left. Okay? Looking at a different problem, if we had 410 minus 34, okay? Let's go ahead and work that out and see what we would have. Let's write the bigger number on the top, 410, and we'll write the smaller number on the bottom. And we'll put a little minus sign because we're going to do some subtraction here, okay? Now again, the first thing we notice, if we're going to work in the right column moving left, we have a 0 minus a 4. Well, 0 is smaller, so we're not going to be able to do that subtraction right away. We're going to have to borrow. We're going to have to make this number bigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to borrow from this column. So we're going to strike him out, and since I don't have too much room, I'm just going to kind of put a 0 up here to remind me that that's a 0 now, okay? And I've borrowed 1, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 here, and it's going to tell me that this is a 10 in this column over here. So I've taken 1 away from this column and I've put it in this column. Okay, so now I have 10, 1, 0, 10, minus 4. And if you look at that and you do that on your fingers, 10 minus 4, starting with 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. I subtracted 4, so what I'm going to be left with is 6. And 6 goes right here, underneath that column. 10 minus 4 is 6. So we're done with that column after we've done the borrowing. Now let's move to this column. Now here, we don't have 1 anymore. That 1 is gone. What we have is 0 minus 3. Well, here we have the same problem as before. We have a smaller number trying to subtract a bigger number. So we have to borrow again. So what we're going to do is we're going to borrow from the 4, and we're going to make him a 3. Okay? And we're going to take that 1 that we borrowed, and I'm going to put it right in front of that 0 right there. And that means that this is now a 10. 1, 0, 10. Okay, so we just did the same thing that we did before. We borrowed again. Okay? 10 minus 3, starting at 10, 9, 8, 7. We subtracted 3 and we got 7. So the answer here in this column is just going to be 7. Okay, and we're done with that subtraction. Now let's move to this column. Well, there's no more 4. He's now a 3. So 3 minus 0 is just going to give you 3. 376. Now this is a really interesting problem, really cool problem, because You start out in this column, you have a 0. Initially, you have a 0. You can't subtract 4 from 0, okay? So you have to borrow. So we borrowed from the 1, we made him a 0, and we made this a 10 over in this column. 10 minus 4 gave us 6. But then when we tried to do this subtraction, we had the same problem. Because we had borrowed, we made this a 0. 0 minus 3, you can't do that either, so you have to borrow again. So again, we always borrow from the number to the left and make him 1 less. In this case, we made this a 3. And what we borrowed went up here and made this a 10. And 10 minus 3 gave us the 7. 3 minus 0 gave us the 3. So really, the rules are the same. Okay? You may have to apply them a few times, but the rules are the same. You start on the right, you try to do some subtraction, and if you get into a point when you have to borrow, you go ahead and borrow, and you may have to borrow several times before the end of the problem. Okay? If you have 289 minus 181, okay, first thing you would do would be to write the bigger number on the top, just like this, and the smaller number on the bottom. And we're going to do the subtraction. Okay? You start in the right-hand column. 9 minus 1 will give you 8. 9 minus 1 gives you 8. 8 minus 8, you're taking away everything, so you have 0 left. You take 8, you throw 8 things away, you have 0 left. Okay? And then in this column, 2 minus 1, this is going to give you 1. So here we didn't have to do any borrowing because every time we subtracted, we could just write a number down, a single digit. So the answer is 108. Okay? Getting to a little bit more challenging problems, 787 minus 692. How would we do that? Again, we want to write the big number on the top, okay? 787, that's on the top. And the smaller number, we're going to write it on the bottom, just like this. And we're going to subtract those two numbers. Same thing as before. Start in the right-hand column. 7 minus 2, what is that going to be? Starting with 7, subtracting 2. 6, 5. We subtracted 2. We have 5 left. So we have 5, okay? Now when we get to this one, 8 minus 9, you have the same problem as before. You can't do this because 8 is smaller than 9. You have to start with something bigger. So we're going to have to do some borrowing here. Okay, so we're going to have to do some borrowing here. So how would we do it if we want to do some borrowing? Well, we're going to borrow from the 7. We're going to scratch him out. We're going to make him a 6. We're going to take the 1 that we borrowed, and I'm going to put it right here in front of that 8. Okay, and it's going to be 18. Okay, so now when we go back, 18 minus 9 is going to give you 9. And to convince yourself of that, you can start at 18 and subtract 9. 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. And that gives you 9. And then 6 minus 6 is going to give you 0. And anytime you have a leading 0, you can just not even write it down. So the answer is 95. Okay? The answer is 95. So you see, I'm just working a lot of different problems, not really so much because they get really harder. They don't really get any harder. It's just because it's like riding a bike, like I was telling you before. You have to work through a lot of these things in order to be really good at them. And so that's what we're doing. We're just working through a lot of problems. So let's do some bigger numbers here. What if we had 2,347 minus 999? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to write the bigger number on the top, 2,347 on top, and then 999 on the bottom. Okay? 999 on the bottom. We want to do the subtraction. So what do we do first? We start in the right-hand column, and we realize that 7 minus 9 is not going to work out because we've got a smaller number on top. We're trying to subtract a bigger number from it. So we're going to have to do some borrowing. So let's do that. We're going to scratch through this 4. We're going to borrow 1. So we're going to make him a 3. So we're going to write a 3 on the top there. Now the 1 that we borrowed goes in front of the 7, making him 17. Okay? So that's all we did. We borrowed from the 4 and we made a 17 here. Okay? So now 17 minus 9, let's go ahead and do that, starting at 17. 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Okay? So we're going to have 8 left under here. We're going to have 8 left under here. 17 minus 9 is going to give us 8. That's all we did there. Okay? Now, let's go to the next column. Here we have 3. There's no more 4 anymore. You have to deal with 3. But you see 3 minus 9 is going to give us the same exact problem as before. We're not going to be able to do that because you have a smaller number on the top, so we're going to need to borrow. Okay? So where are we going to borrow from? We're going to borrow from here. We're going to scratch out that 3, and we're going to make him a 2, and the one that we borrowed from this guy is going to go in front of the 3, making him a 13. Okay? So now you have a bigger number on top. 13 minus 9 is going to give you 4. And I'll let you count that on your fingers, but 13 minus 9 is going to give you 4. Okay? Great, now we're done with this. Now we move on to this guy. Now again, we're going to have the same problem, 2 minus 9. We're going to have to borrow again because we've got a smaller number on the bottom. So let's go ahead and do that. Where are we going to borrow from? We're going to borrow from the digit to the left. We're going to take 1 away from him, making him a 1, and we're going to give that 1 right in front, making him a 12. Okay? So now we can do this. Because 12 minus 9, you can do that. You can do that on your fingers, and that's going to be 3. Okay? 12 minus 9 is 3. So we're done with that column. And then finally over here on the left, 1 minus 0 is just going to give you 1. So the answer is 1,348. This, truthfully, is probably one of the hardest problems you're ever going to have to do because you've got to do all this borrowing, okay? Really, if you just take your time and think through it slowly, and notice how I wrote the numbers kind of far apart so I had plenty of time to use my pencil and kind of write down what I was borrowing, then you can get the right answer and not get confused. We start in the right column, we had to borrow here. We took it away from the 4. We did the subtraction. But then when we came here, 3 minus 9, we had to borrow again. So we borrowed from the next guy. We made him a 13. But then when we came here, 2 minus 9, we realized we had to borrow again, so we borrowed from the 2, making him a 1, and making that a 12. Doing that subtraction, giving me a 3, and then finally on the leading number, 1 minus 0 gave us the 1. That is probably one of the harder problems you're going to have to do. It's probably one of the harder problems you're going to have to do, because you have to borrow 3 times in that case. And it becomes tricky sometimes, okay? So let's say you have 6,734 minus 5,843. How would you do that? Well, first, let's write it over here, bigger number on the top. 6,734, okay? And on the bottom, I'm going to have 5,843. And we're going to do some subtraction here. And notice how I wrote the numbers kind of far apart so I'd have time to do my borrowing, okay? If I have to borrow. So looking at the right-hand column, 4 minus 3, that's easy to do. 4 minus 3 gives me 1, okay? 4 minus 3 gives me 1. Let's go to this column, 3 minus 4. Well, here I have a problem because this number is smaller. I'm trying to take more away from the 3 than I actually have, so I have to go ahead and do some borrowing. So where am I going to borrow from? I'm going to borrow from the next digit over. I'm going to make him a 6, and the one that I take away, I'm going to put him right here in front of that 13, in front of that 3, making him a 13. Okay, now I can do this. 13 minus 4, let's go ahead and do that. Starting at 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. So I took 4 away, and I ended up with 9. Okay, so this is going to be a 9. Okay, now let's work on this column. 6 minus 8. I have the same problem. I can't do that because this number is smaller and I've got to borrow. Where am I going to borrow from? I'm going to borrow from the digit to the left, making him a 5. Okay? The one that I took from here, I'm going to put it in front of that 6, making it a 16. Okay? So now, 16 minus 8 is going to be 8. And the way you can figure that out, starting at 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. I took away 8, and that gave me 8 in the final answer. So 16 minus 8 gave me an 8. Now moving to this column, 5 minus 5 is just going to give me a 0, so I can put a 0 here. But any 0 in the front is just going to not even matter. You don't even have to write it down. So the answer is 891. Okay? Same thing as before. Start at the right, work your way, and borrow when you need to. And just make sure you do it slowly so you don't make a mistake. Okay? I'm going to do one more problem showing you how to subtract these 4-digit numbers, and then we'll wrap it up. 8,785 minus 2,197. So if I want to do this, I'm going to write the big number on the top, 8,785 minus 2,197. I'm just going to write it like this. And I wrote my numbers spaced apart so I can do some borrowing if I need to. Okay? First thing I'm going to do is start working in the right-hand column. 5 minus 7. Well, I've got a problem because the 5 is smaller. So I need to do some borrowing, right? So where am I going to get that from? Where am I going to borrow from? I'm going to borrow from just to the left. I'm going to scratch this 8 out. I'm going to make him a 7. Okay? And the 1 that I took away from here, I'm going to put it in front of the 5, making him a 15. Okay? That's exactly how you borrow. Now I can do 15 minus 7. I can do 15 minus 7 starting at 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Okay? So I'm going to have 8 right here. Okay? 15 minus 7 is going to give me an 8. Okay? Now let me work in this column, 7 minus 9. Now that's obviously a problem for the same reason. I got a smaller number on top than the bottom, so I've got to borrow so I can make this bigger. Okay? So where am I going to get the money from? I'm going to get it from the bank. I'm going to make the 7 a 6, and the 1 that I took away from that 7, I'm going to give it to this guy, making him a 17. Okay? So I'm going to give it to him, and I'm going to make him a 17. Now 17 minus 9 is going to give me 8, and the way you can figure that out is starting at 17. 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Took away 9, gave me 8. 17 minus 9 gives me 8. Okay? Now moving over to the left, 6 minus 1 you can do pretty easily is 5. Okay? Just taking 1 away makes him 5. And then 8 minus 2 is going to give me 6. Okay? So the answer is going to be 6,588. You start at the right. Anytime you have a smaller number on top, you borrow. You borrow from the guy on the left, and give that 1 over here, made him a 7. Did that subtraction. But then when I got here, 7 was smaller than 9, so I had to borrow again. I got the money from the bank over here, made him a 6, gave that 1 over here, made him a 17. Now I can do that subtraction. And then I can do 6 minus 1 and 8 minus 2. And that is basically how you subtract 3 and 4 digit numbers. But you can do this for no matter how many digits you have. You could have, 10 digits long minus 7 digits long. You just start at the right, work your way across the problem to the left, borrow whenever you need to borrow, and make sure and keep it straight, and you'll always get the right answer for these kinds of problems.